When a marriage or civil partnership dissolves, the court faces a specific mathematical problem: how to achieve a fair financial distribution of the marital estate. Defining fairness is a challenge of untangling decades of shared history, shared homes, integrated incomes, and joint debts. In England and Wales, the statutory bedrock governing this distribution is the Matrimonial Causes Act 1973. Unlike some jurisdictions, the MCA 1973 avoids the use of rigid, preset splits for marital assets. Instead, Section 25 of the Act provides the court with broad judicial discretion, outlining factors a judge must consider without dictating a specific mathematical result. Discretion without a standardized framework creates unpredictable outcomes, making the result of a case highly dependent on the specific judge hearing it. To address this, the appellate courts have established an operational structure through case law, creating specific tests to standardize how that statutory discretion is applied. Predicting a financial settlement requires filtering the variables of Section 25 through the modern judicial doctrine known as the Yardstick of equality. Mastering the interplay between these legislative variables and judicial formulas is the only mechanism for providing accurate advice on financial finality. This diagram maps the court's statutory checklist. At the top layer, Section 25(1) establishes the welfare of any child under 18 as the first priority. This functions as the primary filter, ensuring child welfare remains the priority even when weighing competing claims. In practice, this priority often skews capital distribution, as securing stability for the primary caregiver takes precedence over achieving mathematical parity. Below this layer is a list of specific, non-hierarchical variables found in Section 25(2). These begin with financial variables: the income, earning capacity, property, and resources each party has or will acquire. The court weighs these against liability variables: the financial needs, obligations, and responsibilities each party faces. Contextual variables are added next: the parties' ages, marriage duration, and their previous standard of living. Finally, Section 25(2)(f) mandates evaluating contributions to the family's welfare, explicitly including managing the home or caring for children. While Section 25 defines mandatory data points for a settlement, the statute remains silent on the specific weight a judge should assign to each one. Prior to the year 2000, English courts typically capped a homemaker's financial award at the capital required to meet their basic living requirements. This meant the spouse who managed the home received what they needed, while the primary earner retained the surplus wealth generated during the marriage. The House of Lords changed this approach in 2000 with the ruling in White v. White. The case involved a farming couple whose business and domestic contributions were intertwined over a marriage lasting more than 30 years. The court's holding was that there must be no structural discrimination between the financial earner and the homemaker. Both contributions possess equal value. To enforce this, the court introduced the Yardstick of equality. Equal division became the mandatory starting point for dividing surplus assets. Judges apply this yardstick and may only depart from a 50-50 split for a legally sound good reason. By treating domestic labor and financial generation as equivalent, White v. White defined marriage as a financial partnership of equals. To apply these variables practically, modern courts organize facts into 3 operational pillars, formalized in the Miller and McFarland appeals. The foundational pillar is needs, representing the baseline required to secure housing and living expenses for both individuals. If an equal split leaves one party unable to secure basic housing, needs overrides the Yardstick of equality. The court departs from 50-50 to ensure survival. Once needs are met, remaining assets move to the second filter, compensation. This pillar addresses quantifiable economic disadvantage resulting from the marriage. For example, a spouse who sacrificed a career trajectory to raise children. The final pillar is sharing. Sharing applies to the surplus assets that remain only after both needs and compensation have been fully satisfied. It is here the Yardstick of equality is applied. Surplus assets are divided with mathematical precision. This 3-part calculus resolves the tension between the ideal of equality and the practical requirement of post-divorce survival. The sharing pillar has a critical boundary. The Yardstick of equality applies primarily to matrimonial assets. These are assets generated through the partnership, subject to equal division. Non-matrimonial assets originate outside the partnership, like pre-marriage wealth or inheritances. Case law, such as Robson or Jones, confirms that the origin of an asset serves as a valid, good reason to depart from equal division. Courts use ring fencing to exclude these assets from the sharing pool, leaving them with the party who brought them into the relationship. However, asset origin never supersedes the baseline pillar of needs. If matrimonial assets are insufficient to house both parties, the court will invade non-matrimonial property to ensure fundamental needs are met. Ring-fencing non-matrimonial wealth is a legal option, strictly reserved for cases where the economic survival of both parties is already secure. After assets are filtered and weighed, the court executes the final step under Section 25A. This introduces the clean break principle. The court must consider terminating all ongoing financial obligations between the parties as soon as it is just and reasonable to do so. Where capital allows, the court achieves this by dividing hard assets. Where capital is scarce, the court uses periodical payments to maintain a financial tie until independence is possible. The Matrimonial Causes Act 1973 provides the court with the facts that must be considered. Precedents, such as White and Miller, dictate how those facts are weighed against the presumption of an equal partnership. Applying the yardstick of equality systematically against financial needs limits judicial bias and standardizes results. This process transforms statutory discretion into legally binding financial finality. Modern financial remedies act as a retroactive accounting of a partnership. They ensure the dissolution of the enterprise does not leave either the breadwinner or the homemaker with a structural disadvantage.